في أقرب وقت ممكن، وتعمل مصر أيضا مع الأطراف الإقليمية والدولية من أجل تهيئة المناخ أمام استئناف مفاوضات الحل النهائي، بما يؤدي للتوصل إلى تسوية دائمة وعادلة للقضية الفلسطينية. وشكرا لحسن استماعكم.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is China. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. China follows closely to the Palestinian and Israeli situation. It's deeply concerned by the safety of the Palestinian people, saddened by the injuries and deaths of the Palestinian people caused by the conflict in Gaza since July, and strongly condemns any abuse of the force which causes heavy casualties of innocent civilians. Mr. President, China is a firm supporter and a sincere mediator for peace between Palestine and Israel. Since an outbreak of the conflict, China has been using various ways to promote peace and cessation of violence, including putting forward a 5-point proposal for peacefully resolving the Palestine and Israel conflict. China government and Red Cross Society of China have respectively provided 2 trenches of emergency humanitarian assistance to people in Gaza. China welcomes the recent ceasefire agreement reached between Palestinians and Israel and commends the efforts made by the relevant parties to make this happen. China hopes both Palestinians and Israel would put the peace above everything else, uphold the ceasefire, take it as an opportunity to resume peace talks as soon as possible, as push for early, just, reasonable resolution of the Palestinian issue and achieve lasting peace of mutual security. Mr. President, the root cause of incessant Palestine-Israel conflict is that Palestinian issue has not been resolved in a just and reasonable way for a long time. Without justice, there will be no lasting peace. China always supports the legitimate demand and lawful rights of the Palestinian people to establish the independent state of Palestine with full sovereignty on the 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital. China supports Palestine's membership in the United Nations and other international organizations. Mr. President, China is opposed to the construction of settlement or the occupied Palestinian territories. China calls on Israel to respect the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people and stop expelling Palestinians and demolishing their homes. Meanwhile, China calls on Israel to immediately and fully lift the blockade in Gaza Strip to earnestly ease the humanitarian situation there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. South Africa has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished ministers, distinguished delegates, Mr. President, we thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your very comprehensive remarks this morning. We hold this meeting at a background of the ongoing conflict in Gaza, in which thousands of civilians have already lost their lives, thousands more have been displaced, and critical humanitarian infrastructure and property were demolished. A tragic and unnecessary conflict with grave humanitarian implications for the population of Gaza. We are pleased that Palestine and Israel have concluded an open-ended ceasefire agreement mediated by Egypt. We are calling on the protagonists to the conflict to conclude a permanent ceasefire by resolving all outstanding issues, a process that will form the basis for negotiations on the core issues aimed at finding a permanent solution to the conflict. As part of the international efforts to resolve the conflict, South Africa sent 2 special envoys to Israel, Palestine, and various countries in the Middle East. South Africa's efforts to assist in this regard will continue, as the countries of the region have requested South Africa to remain engaged. South Africa is calling for the resumption of negotiations towards a permanent resolution of this conflict, which is a 2-state solution with a viable Palestine existing side by side and in peace with Israel within mutually agreed and internationally recognized borders, based on the 4 June 67 lines with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. Only constructive and cooperative coexistence between 2 viable states can guarantee a lasting and just peace. South Africa is therefore deeply concerned with the latest Israeli plans to expropriate land in the West Bank and calls upon Israel to abandon this decision and all other settlement activities. Mr. President, South Africa stands firmly opposed to the blockade of Gaza, which is one of the key outstanding issues in the negotiations. We call on Israel to permanently lift the blockade to allow Palestinians free movement. Mr. President, it is well known that South Africa has always strongly supported the Palestinian cause in international fora. In 2004, it made written and oral inputs before the International Court of Justice in The Hague for its advisory opinion on the law on the legal consequences of the construction of the wall in occupied Palestinian territory, where the court found that the 4th Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war, 1949, is applicable in the occupied Palestinian territories, and that international human rights law is equally applicable. Furthermore, that the construction of the wall was an attempt to annex the territory of Palestine contrary to international law, as it was a violation of the prohibition to acquire territory by use of force, consequently interfering with the Palestinian right to self-determination. Specifically, the establishment of the settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory is contrary to the 4th Geneva Convention. South Africa also supported the application by the State of Palestine for full membership at the 67th session of the United Nations General Assembly and also its membership at UNESCO. South Africa, as you know, maintains warm diplomatic relations with the State of Palestine, and I thank you.
Thank you. And now Malaysia has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malaysia extends our gratitude to the ELCO Secretariat for preparing a very comprehensive report on this important topic. Malaysia wishes to highlight that this item has remained on our agenda since its introduction at the 27th session held in 1988 on the reference made by Islamic Republic of Iran. Malaysia believes that we must not stop to discuss this important matter for as long as the Israelis' violation continues. The ground incursion on the Gaza Strip in July 2014 is one of the latest incidents on how Israel persistently failed to comply with law, and no tangible action has been taken against Israel, who continues to commit war crimes against the Palestinian people. Malaysia observes that many rules of international law continue to be violated daily due to the lack of strong and effective mechanisms for monitoring and promoting compliance. In relation to this, Malaysia is of the view that there is a pressing need for the international community to explore ways or methods in strengthening the compliance mechanisms for the purpose of creating better legal protection for the victims in the state of Palestine. Malaysia believes that ELCO could play its role as a legal consultative body with direct access to the legal committee of the United Nations General Assembly to submit our legal views on fundamental issues relating to the state of Palestine, as had been consistently done by the Secretary General. The scholarly works published by ELCO on the issue of the state of Palestine, including the most recent special study of the statehood of Palestine under international law and unilateral and secondary sanctions, should be continued. Malaysia calls upon the Secretariat to be provided by this session with mandate to conduct further special studies, including on the issues on compensation and obligations transferred to the League of Nations, as just recently propounded by His Excellency the Minister of the State of Palestine in his intervention earlier. ELCO, Mr. President, Malaysia believes that ELCO, in our limitation, could not send security troops to assist the people of Palestine, but we definitely could utilize our available troops of legal scholars. Thank you.